I joined the CISI because I wanted to expand my network and network in particular with like-minded professionals. And that's what I think the CISI has delivered the most value to me on.
The main aims of the Securities Institute, or the CISI, were in this area of competence, professional competence and integrity, to be an international organization, because that we saw as a marvelous way of building a connection between people working in finance around the world and what's happening in London.
So I'm originally from Singapore, but I came over to the UK to do a bachelor's in philosophy, politics and economics with King's College London. And after that, I really enjoyed my time in the city, so I decided to stay on and found a job here. My entire education prior to university was in Singapore, and I was quite keen to get some overseas exposure, and it was a choice between the US and the UK, and I felt like there was quite a lot of similarities between the education I received in Singapore versus the UK.
My college at Cambridge introduced me to one of the city merchant banks, and that's where I started off. In those days, working in a merchant bank, you tended literally to be sitting on a high stool, shuffling bits of paper. Looking around, saw that a number of my contemporaries were actually doing some work and qualifying in various professions of accountancy or legal professions. And I was, although having an enjoyable life, was really not getting on with what a career was going to do. So at that stage, I followed the example of one or two of my contemporaries and went to the Harvard Business School. And that introduced me really to the whole, a much more interesting aspect of the life of what a business is all about, and the financial sector in particular. I mean, my background had been in law. I think I had, in the days of what was then called school certificate, which I think is like O-level, I took something called general science. But apart from that, I had no specialist scientific knowledge. And in this technological age, that's quite a lot. That's quite a background to have to fill in, as it were.
So I think financial services was always an option on the table. I was never really good at math or science, and humanities came a lot more naturally to me. So I thought potentially law would be a better option, a better fit for me. However, having done an internship in law, I thought that's actually not the career that suited to my personality. I wanted to be in an industry that was more dynamic, but equally challenging. And I think having networked in the city, because I obviously went to university that was based in London, I met a lot of financial professionals at my time in university and decided actually this is something I quite like to get into.
Yes, certainly. It was a pretty old-fashioned way. In other words, it was a drift rather than I didn't sit down and have a long-term strategic plan as to what my career was to be. I envied those of my contemporaries who did have that certainty feeling of they wished to follow a certain professional business, and that was that. The advantage of a financial firm is you get a very good overview of what is happening. It's all fairly general, at least at the start, and as a good basis then to move on either into a profession or into business or into some entrepreneurial move of starting your own work.
I also think that when you have a career in financial services, it also exposes you to getting an understanding of more industries beyond just the financial service firms. I think one of the biggest challenges I face is just knowing where to put my time. There's a lot of competing priorities and a lot of things that you can get stuck into. I think there's like this push, especially within London, that you have to fill up your time with all this value-adding activities. But sometimes, you can overwork yourself and then you sort of lose steam. I think in order to get the most out of those activities, you need to balance it out with having a life as well beyond your work.
Well, I think it's more competitive. I think it's more and more complex.
I do agree that it is highly competitive, and that's why it's important to understand whether it's learning a new language or brushing up on your data skills, how you can differentiate yourself from the rest and add value.
I hope that people still have enough time to relax occasionally and take advantage of some of the attractions of working in the city, where you have close contact with all sorts of people doing all sorts of different jobs. But life is a great more complex, I think, than we get it. I think that one of the biggest challenges is reputation. That the public in general, tend to distrust politicians, they distrust people in advertising, but they also distrust stockbrokers and in the financial world. And there's, with all these strikes going on at the moment and people wanting higher pay.
I definitely agree. I don't think a lack of trust is just targeted to the financial service industry. I think there is also potentially a lot of distrust amongst politicians, amongst the media, and how much integrity there is there. But for financial services, I think there is now a great focus from the regulator here in the UK around doing right by the customer, especially with the Financial Conduct Authority publishing and implementing the first stages of the consumer duty requirements for firms. I think there's a huge impetus that firms are experiencing to do what is right for the customer, to design products with the customer in mind and not just their bottom line.
My personal view is that there may be merit in sometimes looking at specific areas from the CISI's point of view to see what they can add to the general discussion. Do a specific study on a specific point and be prepared to give a view on that. Who've got a membership which covers basically all the important people in the city, directly or indirectly. And if they don't know them, they know somebody who does, as it were. What is essential, and they would be the first to, I'm sure, to say this, is that their prime requirements are, as we started off by saying, the maintenance and improvement of professional standards and of integrity. And whatever else they chose to do should not be allowed to endanger that. Firstly, to keep an eye on any changes which affect professional standards, and also any danger that the behavior and integrity of individuals in specific firms would be affected. It's a matter of keeping a close eye on what's happening.
I think a big concern would obviously be the lack of regulations surrounding the use of AI, but also the fact that a lot of it can be considered a black box. So it's the lack of maybe understanding. I think having the right skill set for the people who are actually having oversight. Actually, maybe just to add on the point of concern, just because there's a lack of regulations out there, I think a lot of organizations don't have maybe a balanced approach to the use of AI on their day-to-day work. Every company's policy and risk appetite around the use of AI will be different. So I think it's just striking the balance between making the most out of the value that AI can deliver in terms of automating mundane tasks, but also ensuring that people understand the outputs and the implications. I think AI is good for tackling things that maybe we don't find so intellectually stimulating. So with financial crime, AI has done a lot in terms of reducing the amount of alerts that someone might have to review in regards to suspicious activity, flags that come about. That's definitely a big plus, because then people can actually focus activity on analyzing the truly suspicious alerts.
Well, it's the moral way of behaving. It's the moral standards which you have, which are not always the same necessarily as the everyday standards of your colleagues or of the society in general. And I think individuals' moral standards can differ from one to the other, and they can certainly change from time to time, over time. But that's what moral standards mean to me, and integrity means you have a moral basis, and you keep to that, as it were.
Acting with integrity as an individual should come quite easily. What I think is even more challenging is ensuring that the people you work with are also acting with integrity. And that's why I think culture of firms, financial firms, is so important. What kind of incentives does the firm have in place? How is the remuneration compensation structured? Is there a culture of openness, and can you speak up to people about issues that you're not comfortable with? I think the CISI has many ways that it promotes integrity and the right behaviors. The formal way of that is through the material that you learn on your various qualifications, but also in interacting with practitioners across the industry, you sort of gain an understanding of what is best practice. So I definitely think that it's quite difficult right now, especially given the macroeconomic situation we're in. But I feel like in today's day and age, there are a lot of free resources that people have access to allow them to differentiate themselves.
I think that they've got to become really good professionals in whatever line it is that they've chosen. On the other hand, I think in this scientific and technical age, they've also got to keep an eye on open as to what's happening elsewhere, because they've got to understand why the next changes are happening and how that's going to affect their career. As individuals, I think they should be concentrating on being what I call people individuals, taking an interest in other people, obviously people of integrity, but also interested in what other people are doing and how they can be helped, and communicating with other people, being open to. I have to go back a couple of steps and talk about what was happening at that point, which is subsequently called the Big Bang. The Big Bang, partly, of course, was a good name because everything that was steady and established in the city was looked at and very often knocked down and started rebuilt. As regards the stock exchange, there were some major changes, principally arising from the fact that individual membership was abolished, and we were having firms membership instead. And the reason again for that was that the overseas firms, the American firms and the European firms, were increasingly coming into London, to the city, and wanted to share in the work which the stock exchange was doing. And so it was a matter of their becoming members of the stock exchange or setting up on their own. And because the membership of the stock exchange was for individuals, not for firms in those days, increasingly they were competing, if you like, with what the stock exchange was doing. So basically the stock exchange had the option of changing their rules to allow the firms to join them so we could all work together, or becoming increasingly irrelevant as London was left with a smaller part of the market. We abolished the idea of individual membership and established a new basis. But that, of course, has consequences. So we weren't entirely happy that some of the good points of the stock exchange might not be lost by this change of membership. And specifically the good points being the professionalism of individual members who had to pass exams and reach certain professional standards to get it. And also equally important, or possibly more important, the integrity of the individual. We started off in South Africa, was our first overseas, in Hong Kong and Sri Lanka. I can remember visiting both those to encourage working together and encourage their people taking our exams. Working also with the American exchanges as well. Continue where necessary to keep an eye on areas where their expertise is as good as, if not better, than some of the people who appear to be leading the charge.
So I know that the CISI has a mentorship program in place. I think it could be quite beneficial to introduce the concept of reverse mentoring as well. Obviously, there's a lot to learn, and the case is very clear for why someone junior might want to learn from someone who's been in this industry for very long. I think the value of reverse mentorship maybe is sometimes overlooked because a lot of young people have new innovative ideas that they might be too fearful to try on their own, and they just need the right support and the right person to help put them into the right places.